Hey, it's Nintenbros.
Hi!
What's going on, Nintenbros podcast listeners? Welcome back to another episode of Nintenbros. What are we, episode 61?
Yeah, I think it is episode 61. It's crazy.
Yeah, so it is the first week of April, and that means we are doing the, switch it up kind of week thing.
Yeah.
And we want to get more practice debating, because after that last debate, I need more practice.
I did not feel the same way, but,
So we out here. We are doing a console debate today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Today's console debate is the DS versus the 3DS.
Sorry.
So it's going to be kind of orchestrated the same way. We basically break it down to the same bullet points and just tweak it a little bit. So starting things off, we're going to talk about the box art, game art, manual appearance. And I kind of just put out all my DS systems.
Friends, yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
I'm going to describe them.
All right.
So we have the DS, commonly referred to as the DS Fat with a PH, because it is kind of like a bulkier DS system. It doesn't look the prettiest, but it gets the job done. It pioneered the DS handheld line. Then a couple years later was the DS Lite, and that sleeks it down a little bit. And then we have the DSi, and then afterwards it kind of treks into your territory of the 3DS. So we have three main variations: DS, DS Lite, and DSi.
Yeah, if you're going with one for the argument, you gotta go for the DSi, man. DSi is the best one.
We'll see.
Sure.
We'll see.
3DS. What do we have? Well, we have, let me go down real quick. We have the Nintendo 3DS, the Nintendo 2DS, the Nintendo 3DS XL, the new Nintendo 3DS, the new Nintendo 3DS XL, and the new Nintendo DS XL. Now, for the main one, the 3DS XL, let's just say, it has the circle pad. It has the 3 buttons on the bottom. I think it's a little different than the DS, but it's not a huge change. It's just the home menu and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you have the 3DS slider. The 3DS slider, obviously. And then it's kind of if you've seen if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably seen a 3DS before. So I'm just going to move on.
If you haven't, go look it up. It's very widespread. Everyone knows what they are.
And I just want to note this down, that there are about 145 console variants, like Mario and Luigi, Pokemon, Galaxy themed, and plenty more. So
yeah, there are definitely a lot of variations of that. Yeah. I actually put down some cool colors because I just wanted to, put it in the document. So the DS has some really cool colors that you guys should check out. That is just called Pearl Pink, Lava Red, and there's a Toys R Us Gold. And then for the DS Lite, the ones that I personally like the best were the Onyx colored, Green, and Metallic Rose. And then DSi had some cool colors that were Light Blue, Gloss Red, and Arctic White. I actually went on DS just colors, a website, just to see all the different variations. I didn't count how many there were. There was a lot. There wasn't as many special editions because it just wasn't as prevalent for the time. Mm-hmm. But they definitely did change up the colors a little bit. And personally, I think the DS Lite was the best DS system there was, because it was so sleek. It looked so nice. The buttons were just laid out perfect, and it just fits your hands good and feels right. The DS Lite was what the DS wanted to be. It just needed a few years to get there.
Yeah, I see that. In general, I think Nintendo does a good job with naming colors for for anything in general.
Oh yeah,
Lava Red. That's just Lava Red. It sounds nice.
Yeah,
it sounds
it's actually
crisp.
Without getting too psychological, if you name something other than just a bland color, if it's just pink, if you put something cool in there Lollipop Pink or Pearl Pink. Yeah. Customers are a lot more enticed to get it, so that's why they do that. And I'm sure they have some marketers that just know what they're doing to just kind of
for sure.
The best. So
I can definitely see that.
It's kind of cool how you picked up on that. Also, I have the battery life that was kind of for the DS line, and DS regular was 10 hours. DS Lite was 15 if you had it on setting 3, because the DS Lite had 5 light settings. That was something it promoted a lot. Was
really?
Yeah, because there wasn't a slider for the light setting, but there was just setting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you had it on 3, it was regular. That's 15 hours, and then DSi had a 11-hour battery life. So.
Oh, cool. Well, I do not have battery life statistics, but I'm assuming it's probably around there. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I mean they don't fluctuate too much. It's not like the 3DS is going to be 4 hours.
Yeah, I know. I know if it gets older, which with any system, it will depreciate battery life. Because I know on my 3DS now I have 5 hours on it maybe. Yes, but that is really old. So
yeah, the 3DS, the original one of it too, kind of suffered from a lot of battery usage due to the 3D power of it. If you use the 3D while playing the games a lot, your battery life was significantly shorter. But that kind of comes with the cost of using the 3D. It's to be expected. It uses more power. So
yeah, that's true. A few other things just to mention here about like the types and how it looks. The small version of the 3DS has shorter screens than the DS XL. Was there a DS XL version, like the DSi XL?
DSi XL, yes.
But the 3DS XL versions are bigger than anything the DS has to offer. I think you had one, and my friend had one, and I've only ever had a 3DS like normal, and there's a big difference. Like it feels way better.
I actually have two 3DS XLs. I got a regular red one and then a Pikachu one. It's pretty sweet.
I want like a variant.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
So I also have a couple things I just want to toss in there because we didn't really have a template, so we're just kind of throwing it in as we go.
Yeah, we are.
So the DS line introduced dual screens because originally we had the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP. So it introduced the functionality of dual screens, which is DS itself. Mm-hmm. It introduced the touchpad in a time when, like, honestly, touchpads were almost non-existent. The DS pioneered in 2004. The first iPhone was like 2005, 2006, maybe late 2004. So it introduced touchpad before it was really prevalent. Which is kind of monumental. It introduced a microphone right in the middle. Some mini games in Mario Party had you blow into the microphone.
Those are great mini games.
Yeah, Nintendogs had you say Lucky, Maxwell, Daisy.
But did that ever work well for you?
Not
for me.
I mean, we all played Nintendogs.
Not for me.
We all played Nintendogs.
Didn't work for me.
It offered Wi-Fi compatibility, hence how Mario Kart DS was one of the first ones that could just go online and you can play.
Oh man, great game.
Yeah, it had PictoChat, which is kind of like text messaging and kind of whack, but worth mentioning because it was advertised a lot. So I just wanted to say that.
Do you remember that one time that we had babysitters over and they put us to bed and we communicated on PictoChat through our rooms?
Yes, I do.
I vividly remember that.
Early 2000 things.
Yeah, that was a great time.
And then the DS also introduced a lot of additional buttons. It gave X, Y, Select, Start to the handhelds because originally Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP had A, B, Select, Start, LR, but this did introduce the X and Y. However, X and Y was on the SNES, but for handhelds.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have some improvements and additions as well. These were from like the 3DS to the 3DS XL, but I'm sure it still just applies from like the DS to 3DS because obviously things are just going to get upgraded in general. So it had upgraded processors and increased RAM, and the 3DS feature obviously, and then the circle pad, and it also came with AR cards. So, those AR cards.
Oh yeah, augmented reality.
Need to get me some of those. Start of the metaverse,
Yeah, for real. I also have that the DS offers backwards compatibility with Game Boy Advance games up until the DSi. The DSi kind of discontinued that, but they did have the eShop, and you could get some Game Boy Advance games there. So
okay,
that's kind of how the DSi dealt with that. And then, believe it or not, I learned about this when researching the DS, but originally when Nintendo was introducing the DS itself, like the console, it was introduced as a third pillar to Nintendo. It wasn't supposed to be the next generation of handhelds. It wasn't supposed to be the next generation of home consoles. It was supposed to be its own unique identity and its own unique third pillar. And that kind of goes into the general audience reception because gamers were confused exactly what the third pillar meant. Like, what is it then if it's not a handheld and it's not like a home console? So they were a little suspicious about it and how it would benefit them in any new ways. And they were also suspicious of graphics and power, considering Sony was developing the PlayStation Vita at this time. So the competition of the DS was the Vita. Later on, in hindsight, the DS dusts the Vita, but that was what it was going up against at that time, which is important to acknowledge. And then casual gamers were just intrigued by the new features because they did show off dual screen and a developer system is what DS was also standing for at the time.
Really?
So, yes.
That's interesting.
And also the touchscreen. So that was a casual response of it.
All right. Well, I did not include casual and gamer because I was looking up like what did gamers think of the 3DS. All I just found was like, here's the new 3DS feature. Here's why the 3DS didn't do well. Here's why it did well. And then I looked up why the 3DS was received good casually or whatever, and nothing was popping up. So I'm just gonna go into my sales because, well, I don't have any of that other stuff because I cut it out. So I know the DS has overall sold more than the 3DS, but I looked up on Google and I quote how many 3DSs were sold in the first month. And the first thing that came up was 3DS sells twice as many as the DS did in its first year in the US. That would balance itself out. The DS would go on to sell almost like twice as much. But yeah, still interesting to note. So copies sold for the first year, actually, I'm taking it. was 4.5 million systems for the 3DS, and copies sold overall as of February 2022, it has sold 75.95 million units across the world, which is lower than the DS, but it still sits just outside of the top 10 selling consoles. So
it's still respectable. It's not like, oh, this was a bad console. It's still up there.
Yeah.
Copies sold within the first week for the DS was 653,000 units in just 1 week. So the pioneer week of the DS, 653,000 people got it. Copies sold overall is 18.79 million just for the DS, like the DS Fat. If you include all of the DSs, DSi, DS Lite, DS, then you're looking at 154 million units, with the DS Lite being the most popular. And I can kind of see that. I personally think the DS Lite it feels the best. It screams Nintendo. I even like the little logo they had of like the 2 triangles on the top of it.
Oh yeah, those 2 triangles. I never.
Or not triangles. Sorry, rectangles.
Yeah, that's. I was gonna say not triangles.
2 sentences of how the DS plays, because that's kind of my next thing. The DS stands for dual screen or developer system, depending on who you ask. If you ask the developers or if you ask the people.
Yeah.
The DS improves upon the Nintendo Game Boy Advance SP by adding new buttons, a whole nother screen, one of which is touchscreen, Wi-Fi compatible capabilities, a microphone, and more. All of this makes for a much more friendly and immersive gaming experience.
All right. Very nice. The 3DS was the successor to the DS, in which it added 3D capabilities, the circle pad, and much more, such as a more advanced home screen, menu settings with the brightness easier accessible, everything like that, Wi-Fi. And the bonus apps was a big part of it, too, for the 3DS starting off. So
they really sold that augmented reality. And I'm not going to front, like, I poured time into that augmented reality. I remember getting that mystery box and putting my 3DS out and like things, or Face Raiders, I think it was.
Yeah, that was the thing,
like
too.
That. It was some cool stuff.
So this was super difficult to find. So I'm going off of like a suspicious graphic. But the total 3DS games made were 66 main Nintendo games. Mind you, this is like Pokemon, Mario, your Zelda, anything else that's big brand Nintendo. Plus 344 third-party games to make a 410 game library for the 3DS that I know of. You know, I was getting a lot of weird numbers. If you try and look that up, it's really hard to justify what is right. And on the same graphics, so you know it's coming from the same source. You had the DS games had 98 main Nintendo games, along with 1,639 third-party games.
1,600.
Yeah, if you look it up, you'll get the same number, like a lot.
Wow.
To equal 1,917 games, total games for the DS. But I also have a little jab here at the DS. Just to be clear, the 3DS can play any and all of the DS full 1,917 game library, and while the DS can play Game Boy Advance games being backwards compatible, they can't play original Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, all of which you can buy in the 3DS eShop, along with Game Boy Advance games. And remember the thing that DSi had with DSiWare? Well, the 3DS had a quick update to let users download anything from that library as well.
Wow, so the 3DS was on it with backwards compatibility.
Yes, they were. You can play anything from the DS on the 3DS.
All right, so my biggest success for the DS was in a time where Nintendo was complacent in sales with the Game Boy Advance and underperforming in the consoles wars against Xbox and PlayStation 2, because this was 2004, right? Mm-hmm. So take a trip back to 2004. I know you were just like 1 year old, but like let's pretend we're right there. The Game Boy Advance, right? Mm-hmm. The Game Boy Advance was doing fine. It wasn't doing anything crazy right now. It was on like the last couple years. It was like plateauing out. They were complacent with it. They were like, we don't really need to do anything, but we should. GameCube underperforming because Xbox was made out for gamers. PlayStation 2 was the best console of all time selling.
Oh yeah.
So the GameCube was already knocked down a few pegs. Like no one was like, wow, the GameCube's amazing right now. It just wasn't talked about like that.
Yeah.
So Nintendo's name was kind of hidden away. It was still out there. They were still one of the big three, but they weren't on top at all. Mm-hmm. So the launch of the DS propelled Nintendo back into the game market they once dominated, because they dominated throughout the NES era, throughout the SNES era. They were doing good throughout Nintendo 64 era, and then they dropped back during GameCube. So DS propelled them out of that slump that they had. It seemed as though everyone owned a DS at some point because of all the sales it had, 154 million. Yeah. Eventually, like, people were saying their mom had a DS, their dad had a DS, like, just everyone had a DS at some point.
I remember we went down to visit our cousins in Georgia, and, that one person had a DS to play Brain Age.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was just so popular. After recording the sales numbers, the DS line goes down as the second most popular video game console of all time, just following behind the PlayStation 2.
Wow, it's second? That's crazy.
Which includes the DS, DS Lite, and DSi, so it's not just like the DS Fat.
Yeah.
This system single-handedly revitalized Nintendo or reimagined what gaming could look like, because we're taking a look at the Game Boy Advance SP, single screen, couple buttons, and then you go from that all the way to the DS, dual screen, touchscreen, microphone, Wi-Fi. That's so many new capabilities. It just completely reimagined what gaming could look like handheld. So that was its biggest success.
Well, to just talk about that a little bit, if we could.
Sure.
Unfortunately, while it is the biggest success, if we're comparing the DS to the 3DS also does all of that, so... All right, so the biggest success for the 3DS would not be the obvious in the 3D capability, but actually the fact on how many games were available and the backwards compatibility with the DS, like I was just saying. With the 3DS having a very much smaller library, surprisingly, it still managed to keep all users interested in letting them play all the DS games along with any DSiWare game.
Very good, very good. I have biggest Pitfalls next. So similarly, but not quite as bad as the Wii U, the system suffered off the rip from poor execution. Because again, when they were introducing the DS, they were like, this is the third pillar. This is just a new addition to us. Yeah. So like it didn't fit. It wasn't the flop of the Wii U. Like the Wii U got toasted. But it didn't do as good as it could off the rip. The console was talked up to be a third pillar, not the next installment. The original DS also gets a lot of bash about looking clunky and feeling awkward.
Yeah.
Because, like, let's be real, it wasn't perfected. It was like the first vision that they had. So it's okay. But a revision amongst the hardware was promoted rather quickly by the community, and 2 years later it was out.
All right, very nice. The biggest pitfall on the 3DS was probably the fact on how it just confused some people at launch, and Nintendo didn't really see the sales they wish they would have. However, there's plenty of explanation for this. Like, many people had no clue all the cool games that they could access with the 3DS and only saw it as a DS with like 3D capability screens, which was like, you know, am I really going to upgrade just so I can see in 3D? But it was much more than that with like with the actual 3DS games. And the fact that this also happened along in 2011 and kids were starting to get absolutely obsessed with Apple technology like iPhones and iPads.
I think that is like the year I got an iPhone.
Yeah,
because I was like 14 or 15, and I just remember getting an iPhone right around then for the first time and just playing Subway Surfers and being absolutely in love.
Yeah, so that's not like, you know, you don't see the iPhone games and the iPad games as like big leaders in the gaming industry, but back to like, you know, the kids kind of reigned for the 3DS. Like, people were obsessed with that, and it made the gaming industry more competitive. Not like, you know, they're good at a gaming industry, but like they draw kids in.
Yeah, no, I see that.
So that's how it suffered from that. It kind of came out of that and still sold like half the DS total sales, which is still really big, just remains outside of the top 10, but it did suffer from sales.
Yeah, moving right along, we got replayability for the next section. Did you cut this one out, or do you have something for this as well? Because I know it's kind of weird.
I do not have replayability.
Okay, so I just went with like the gaming library and like what I thought of it. So the gaming library of the Nintendo DS is like absolutely massive, and many games originate from the DS itself. So while many games are like also remakes or continuations of the series, there are plenty of originals like Kirby Canvas Course. Yes, Kirby is like a continuation, but like Canvas Curse originated from there, because now we have Kirby Canvas Curse like Wii U. Yeah. We also have like Mass Attack, that's an original one. New Super Mario Bros. Originated in the DS. That's kind of cool. Brain Age, like all those like silly brain games. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon pioneered in the DS, also Game Boy Advance, but also DS at the same time. So yeah. And then all these games would later see entries in future consoles. The DS also offers a slot to play Game Boy Advance. I know we already talked about that, but...
Yeah, we did. The next section I have is remakes and ports. What did the 3DS had? Well, they had none, but its predecessor was the DS, and it does not have a successor, even though people think it's the Switch, but the Switch is classified slightly more as a home console. Whether we'll see a successor to the 3DS, probably not. Honestly,
I
maybe
think the successor would be the Switch Lite, because that's like the...
That's true.
That's
you
like
could argue that. That's true.
Handheld console. So
that's very true. But not like the main Switch. But, you know, will there be a direct successor to the 3DS? Like, you know, the classic style of how the DS and 3DS did it?
Like a clamshell.
Yeah. We don't know, but that's that.
All right, so the next section I have is big points, and I only have one big point for this. So $150 was the price point for the Nintendo DS when it first came out, and that was significantly less than the competitor's price of the PlayStation Vita, which was $250. Also, Nintendo held this price for much of its life cycle. Unlike, I'm going to take a jab at the 3DS right here. Unlike the 3DS, where a price drop happened within the first few months, making early adopters irritated. I remember this because I was so excited to get the 3DS. I think it was like $300, $350. Don't quote me. It's like some outrageous price. And I paid for it because I like finally was getting my own money. And I was like, yes, this is the first console I'm going to buy. I bought it, and then I was like reimbursed with an ambassador thing, but I forget what it was. Like, what did I get? I don't quite remember.
Sorry, I totally remember that happening because the 3DS, the launch happened, and then I remember stories of people bringing their 3DS like back to Walmart and stuff because it dropped immediately. They were like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, people were irritated. The early adopters were not happy about that.
Yeah, but 3DS is still whatever. We'll get into it. The 3DS added a digital storefront from launch, while the DS didn't do that till a third model. Big there. 3DS added a whole nother category of games you can play, like Virtual Console. Some people didn't like it, but there's still a solid amount of people who really like the 3D effects with all the games. I know this was kind of hated on in some parts. A lot of people don't really like the 3D, but then again, it's like you have it there and you can turn it off, so it's not something you can really bash it for necessarily. So there's that. And there was a bunch of bonus apps from launch like AR cards, Face Raiders, Activity Log, Street Pass, which is a big one. A lot of people like that. I know I was obsessed with that. I would throw my 3DS back and forth to try and get steps with my friends.
Oh, I forgot about Street Pass. That's cool.
Yeah. So I really like that, but that's what I got for that.
All right, so now we're going to KO each other, right? Let's beat each other down.
You go first. You're the DS. You're the older one.
All right, so by no means is the Nintendo 3DS a bad console. It has strong games for its library and a unique gimmick to set it apart from competition. But in the end, that's all it was. It was a gimmick. Many people complained about the 3D being hard to use or hurting their eyes. You had to find the sweet spot when using the 3DS and the 3D capabilities. Otherwise, you'd lose it. There was stuff going around where parents were supposed to monitor their child's 3D intake. Yeah. And it's silly, but it was around. I remember reading Game Informers about it. I remember it being a thing. So it happened. In comparison to the DS gaming library, the 3DS gaming library stands for some competition. Like, they have sustainable games and they're very good, but it's not victorious. The games focus too much in incorporating a gimmick that wasn't all that popular. So much so that later in the console's life cycle, a 2DS variant was released to completely eliminate the 3D effect. It also doesn't help that some of the strongest games for the 3DS were ports of games that we have already come to know and love. Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. I looked up most popular 3DS games. Both of those were always the top two. Your top two are Nintendo 64 games. I'm just saying, it's not like the end of the world because you guys do have very strong other gaming, but it's just up there. When comparing Kirby Planet Robobot to Mass Attack, or Pokemon X and Y to Pokemon Platinum, or Super Mystery Dungeon to Explorers of Time or Darkness, or even Mario and Luigi Dream Team to Partners in Time, I will always choose the latter. If the biggest argument that the 3DS is better because it is capable of playing DS games, the games that we're talking about that make my system great, you're better because you can play my stuff because my stuff is so great, you've already made my argument for me. We're better because we pioneered this. Of course, you're comparing the Wii to the GameCube. The GameCube came before, the Wii comes after. It's like comparing the first Animal Crossing to the last Animal Crossing. You can't say we're better because we have all this stuff that's just come to just be expected at this point. We started new stuff, and you saying that we're better because we have your stuff, we're just that great that it makes you better because you have our stuff. That's my argument with that. And also the DS has the ability to play Game Boy Advance games, so backwards compatibility for one generation is kind of evened out. We do have that technology, and I know you said the eShop, but the eShop wasn't thought of anywhere. Xbox didn't have it, PlayStation 2 didn't have it. The eShop, we could just kind of eliminate it as a sort of thing that was common for your generation minus the DS generation. And the DS did eventually adapt to it with the DSi. So that's my argument with that. That's the KO opponent. That's what I got.
All right.
Any retaliation?
Oh, yeah, a bunch. Can we go back to the one point of how I already lost the argument if we're talking about that, right?
Sure.
That argument sounds to me like it's someone who knows they've already lost, but they're trying to make it seem like they already won.
Explain
because
how so.
If you're the 3DS, we're comparing which one is the better console, right? What defines the better console? The games they can play, the games they have, the graphics, what it has to offer. And the 3DS does every single one of those better. It's just, sure, we can play your games, but that's just like, hey, if you ask me, do you want to play all the Nintendo DS games on the 3DS along with the 3DS games? I'm not going to say no. I mean, sure, your games are better. I won't even deny it. Your games are better. I love the DS games. But we can play them on the 3DS, baby, so no one cares.
Okay.
But let's go back to the first argument, too. What was that one?
We have... the 3DS gimmick. How that wasn't even that great. And how they had later made a 2DS because the gimmick was so just like frowned upon.
That's true. I just like to...
That's true.
No. That is true. I just like to take not a jab at the DS, but a jab at anybody who bought a Nintendo DS. Because there is this cool thing called a slider where you could turn it to 0. And it's actually 3DS, really neat. Right? It's actually really neat. Yeah. It's actually really neat where you can just turn it all the way down. And that's all you have to do.
Yeah.
That you're done with it.
A lot of complaints came from the gaming industries focusing too much on incorporating that gimmick that they couldn't focus on the gameplay themselves because our DS games are more so focused on the gameplay themselves, which makes our games better than the 3DS games.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, man. It's just unfortunate how we can play these games too. It just really is.
Your sole argument is that we can play those games, but that's a test of the times. I'm telling you. Animal Crossing New Horizons is inherently better than Animal Crossing the beginning one because it has all those updated graphics, because it has all that stuff. It's just grown to just be like what it's supposed to be at that time.
I see what you're saying, right? And you're correct. But the thing is, it just doesn't matter. It's a great argument, but at the end of the day, in the terms of which console is better, it comes down to the main point of which has more games, better playing games. And the fact of the matter is that you can play all the DS games and all the 3DS games, while a DS can just play the DS games. It doesn't matter that the DS pioneered these games because you can play it. No one gets a 3DS, right? And they're like, you know what? If I got Partners of Time, I really have to go get a DS now because they pioneered this game. Nobody cares.
You're right with that, but when we talk about which console is better, we also have to look at the fact of which console did more for Nintendo itself. The 3DS kind of plateaued sales, it made some customers angry, and the DS took what was going under for Nintendo. The GameCube was going under, the Game Boy Advance SP was kind of just plateauing, and the Nintendo DS kind of resurfaced Nintendo in a way that just made it come back to light, whereas the 3DS just kind of knocked it a little bit. It wasn't bad, it didn't bring them under or anything, but it didn't help them in any way.
And I guess
the games that we can play, we can talk about all day. The DS is better, but man, I'm just coming at you like this. I don't know.
What do you mean come at me like what?
I just really, in my heart, believe the DS is better.
Let's go back to, what was that one point of the... how it made Nintendo better? That's kind of, that's a good argument, I guess.
Yeah, tell me a better way
You can have that one, but we're comparing... What is the better console? We wouldn't, again, it's the same argument for why you wouldn't go and get a DS for Partners in Time. Nobody's going to get a 3DS and be like, you know what? Well, the DS made Nintendo the better, so I got to go get a DS. No one cares. At the end of the day, no one cares.
In hindsight, what makes a console better? Nintendo DS made Nintendo better. Nintendo 3DS plateaued Nintendo.
Well, what made Nintendo better? That's the argument, is which console is better.
KO me. Let's go. It's already done now.
I do have to still read my KO, don't I? Sorry. I don't know about you, but this just feels like a really stupid debate. The DS was cool and all for the time, and it sold more, which is cool, I guess. But in modern era, it's not even close to even touching the 3DS. You can literally play all DS games on the 3DS. So in terms of games, the DS has nothing to stand on against the 3DS. What's after that then? Sales? That's pretty much an afterthought in terms of which one is better. No one's going to review both and be like, you know what? The DS sold more, so I'm actually going to go with this one. It's just not how it works. What's after that? Bonus apps, 3DS wins. Graphics, 3DS wins. Hell, even the settings you can go into and look at and change, the 3DS wins. You have PictoChat and Flipnote. Hold on to that because that's all the DS has over the 3DS and all it ever will have.
Wow. Dude, flip notes were intense, though. Like, come on.
I'll give it to you. Flip notes were good.
What can match flip notes in the 3DS?
Well, shoot.
Dude.
There's a reason it hasn't been brought back.
DSi wins because of flip note. End of story. Prove me wrong.
I don't think that's true. There's a reason flip note's not back yet.
Okay, so the Nintendo DS is the superior console. In a time where Nintendo needed the next big thing to be in their favor, they delivered. The DS outshined the PS Vita remarkably well, brought Nintendo's name back in the ring for all gamers, hardcore and casual. It is deemed as the second best-selling console in history. The DS also implemented a much bigger wave of new features already discussed in comparison to the 3DS. There was a lot more riding on the success of the DS and the 3DS, and while that doesn't make one system inherently better than the other, it should help in judging which console is ultimately better. The DS is better because it saved Nintendo from falling under in the early 2000s, whereas the 3DS more or less plateaued the popularity of Nintendo for the time being.
My closing case sentence is, there's not much to say for this one because it's fairly clear, but just in case you missed the last part, here's a recap.
Oh, great.
More games, 3DS. Better games, possibly the DS, but guess who can play those games? The 3DS. Bonus apps, 3DS. Camera, 3DS. eShop, 3DS. Settings, 3DS. Graphics, 3DS. I could go on, but I won't. The sales discrepancy has clear reasoning, and it's not a valid reason on why one console is better than the other at all. While these consoles are both great consoles, it's like comparing apples to oranges. The DS was cool, but it's just outdated and got put in a heavyweight boxing ring as a scrawny guy.
Wow. What about that DS Lite, though? The DS Lite can compare.
How?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I still like the way DS Lites look. You put a DS
Lite... they're cool, but they're not a better console. In front of me
and the 3DS, like, depending on what game I'm going to play, I might choose the DS Lite, to be honest. The DS Lite's more comfortable.
Well, that's just choosing what, like, game you're going to play on which console, you know? It's cool to play games on their native console, but, you know, I was going to say, it sounds like your argument is more focused around which console helped Nintendo more and not how the DS is better than the 3DS. That's what I'm saying.
The DS is better because it just implemented so much more stuff than the 3DS. The 3DS added 3D and a couple apps, right?
But it doesn't matter what it implemented because the 3DS still has it all. If you take a chocolate bar, and you have chocolate and peanuts in it, right? Say the general audience loves all these things I'm saying. Mm-hmm. If you have a chocolate bar is the Game Boy. You have a chocolate bar with peanuts. That's the DS. And then you have a chocolate bar with peanuts and caramel. And everyone loves all three of those things, but they love the three things the most. They're going to pick the three things the most because it has all of those in one.
Well, which one's the most important? The one that started it all, the chocolate. Because without chocolate, you won't have the other three.
That's a weak point, though.
How's it weak?
Because it doesn't make one better than the other. It just means it came first.
Well, I don't remember where we were. We just got interrupted, and it's all good. I think we're about wrapped up, though.
Yeah, I think it's been a good argument. I appreciate where you came from with the DS. You know, I know it was a bit of a harder argument for you.
I think we both made our case. I think it's time to let the audience decide.
Yeah, can the audience please decide? If you made it this far, please let us know.
Yeah, just tell me I'm right. I want to hear. Vote for the DS.
Tell me I'm right. Vote for the 3DS. We can do everything the DS can better.
All right, but without further ado, let's close this out and move on to what's new and what we've been playing. All right, here we are. What is new? Well, we can probably skip through this section pretty quickly because nothing's new with me.
I just want to say, right, nothing's new right now, but I had an interview for a job today, so potentially I could make money soon. Thank you, I appreciate it. And put it to having stuff that is new.
Dude, the flea market is the 1st of May. Let's go.
I'm so excited if I get this job. You know, I'm really excited now because, you know, I've done the interview sections. I've done both of them. Mm-hmm. Now all I have to do is wait. I might get a call saying I got a job, and I might, you know, get an email saying I didn't. Now I just have to wait. So
Nice. I do want to note, my friend showed me a picture of a giant Pichu Funko at a store for $80. And I wanted it, but I had to contain myself because I work at Wegmans now and not the post office. So
I work at Wegmans, hopefully.
Yes, bro!
Yeah.
So, now we move on to what are we playing? What have you been diving into this week?
All right, well, I literally just played Animal Crossing for a little bit. New Horizons, by the way. And then I set it down because I was like, you know what? This is really cool. You know, this is a great game, but I don't think I'm going to get into this right now. You just kind of have to be in that mood. But I I literally haven't played anything else. I don't think I started a new basketball channel. I won't like promote that or anything, but I started a new basketball YouTube channel and stuff. So that's been growing a lot actually. I think I'm almost at 40 subscribers for that.
Wow,
so
that's really good.
I've been doing that like every day. You know, I come home, I get out of school at 3:15. I come home. It takes me till like 5 to get everything up. Then I got to focus on whatever my main channel needs and stuff. So I've just been doing a lot of that. So
that is really good. Congratulations.
Thanks.
What have I been playing this week? I've put time into Super Mario Maker 2, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Super great game, man. Super great.
Yeah, that's the first thing I'm going to buy if I get a job.
Yeah, I played it with a couple of my friends. I had our buddy Reepson come through, and he actually played Player 2 for a little bit. Yeah, because it's so just like player friendly. He was able to play it and enjoy it, and it was fun.
That's awesome.
I went over to our buddy Steven's house, and he was playing it with me. That was really fun. So just playing bouncing house to house, playing Kirby with people, and it's a great game.
That's great. That sounds awesome. Totally buying that if I get a job. 100%. Yeah.
And then I also put a little time into The Legend of Zelda because, well, I have to do that.
That's actually going to unlock as an option for me tomorrow. I don't know if I'll get around to that tomorrow. I got a few stuff to do before we go to someone's house. But yeah.
Word. So, are there any closing coins that you want to close out with?
It's been a long. I don't know if it's been a long episode, but it's been like a
heated one,
an energy draining episode. So I don't think I have anything else to say right now, but subject to change in the future. I guess I don't know.
I think we are ready to close because there's nothing else I want to say, so why don't you bring us home?
Yeah, guys, thank you all so much for watching or listening to Nintenbros number 61, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
61, almost 62. We'll get to 62 next week, I promise. We hope you did enjoy. Check us out on our socials. Let us know who won.
That's important. I feel like we both made great points. I feel like we both have great arguments. Like, one could easily say, 3DS plays DS games, but like, just look at the full thing. What do you genuinely feel? Yeah, you can look at the full thing and then just, go back to what you know is right and choose the 3DS. So let us know over there at Nintenbros 93 on Instagram and Nintenbros 6 on Twitter. Literally just direct message us. We will message back. We don't bite. Relax. I feel like that's a very cliched thing to say, though. So I'd rather say we don't hiss, so... I'm sorry. You can check me out on all my socials at Onaship on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, everywhere. I'm posting a lot of reels and stuff. I have like an Onaship memes page if you want to follow that. I bet you can find me pretty much anywhere. I have a lot of accounts. Yeah, you do, but it's great. Love it. You can check me out at Onabo97. I'm on the IG, on the TikTok. I posted a couple TikToks the other day. I saw that. Those are like blowing up. Yeah, I was like, wow. One had 4,000, almost 5,000 views. I like that. So I'm trying to post a little more on the TikTok. I'm on the YouTube. We did a couple lives, just having a good time. Yeah, I missed the live stream the other day. I was with a friend, so it's all right. I like doing one Friday, one Saturday, like either or, and then one Tuesday. I was kind of pissed I missed it, honestly. No, it's okay. We had Doggo in. We had JTV. JTV showed up. We had a couple good people come through, and I had a fun time. Stream again Tuesday. Check me out Tuesday night. Tonight. Can't do it. Why? Because I gotta edit this. All right, is that all you gotta say? That's all I gotta say. All right, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in to Nintenbros number 61, the 3DS versus DS. We know the 3DS won, but without further ado, bye-bye.